breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison. What's up, buddy?
I'm doing great. I like this topic. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that after we talked about this the last time when we were kind of outlining the topics that we wanted to cover, this one kind of resonated with me a little bit because I heard the quote right before we outlined this. And the quote is, in life, you can control two things. You can control your attitude and you can control your effort. And today we are going to talk about why your attitude is so important when you're trying to overcome something like a chronic illness.
That's right.
If this is your first time watching or listening, please hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications, because we're going to continue to roll out new content like this each and every week. And hopefully we do something that's applicable to you. So why is your attitude so important when you're looking at addressing something like a chronic illness?
Well, I think there's so many different dimensions to it. I think, the mindset allows for a lot. Positive mindset allows for pursuing opportunity. It gives us hope. Without having a positive mindset, you will just give up. And if you give up, you could never even find a solution. And there's multiple different, with chronic illness, you usually have to seek out a lot of help over a long period of time before you find it. So it allows for seeking opportunity and not giving up. The concept of I can versus I cannot is powerful as well. I think it introduces gratitude. Ultimately getting rid of that victimization. So if you have a positive mindset, you won't be a victim. You just won't be. You'll always think of what you can do versus not. I think the positive mindset also keeps us motivated. Without positivity, we can't be motivated, right? So those are some. I think also when we have a positive mindset, we see progress. And in the musculoskeletal model that you work with a fair bit of that, you probably see this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say yes, especially you see it too.
Like function. Function or
but
something.
When you look at from a musculoskeletal standpoint, it's a little bit more objective. You know what I mean? I can go and they can see it too. But generally speaking, and I'm sure, and it's like this in your side of it too. People who are more positive will take the wins that they get, appreciate the wins, and they carry that as momentum over to continue their progress. Does that make sense?
That's right.
So say you have diminished cervical range of motion, right? They can't turn their head at all. All of a sudden they can turn their head 10 degrees. Well, that's not a whole lot, but it's 10 degrees more than they had before. Then all of a sudden, they've got 10 degrees. They're super enthused with that. They feel very fortunate they have that. I'm gonna get 40.
That's true. That brings me to this thought. There was this patient that I had, and she had MS. She was in a wheelchair, and her lower extremities just didn't work. But when she started, she could move her two first toes just a little bit. Lift them off the deck, right where she'd rest her feet on the chair. She could move them a little bit. And we built on that, but she had enough motivation, enough positivity, because there were other changes going on. There was digestive improvement and less pain, and she was getting some sleep. And she saw those as wins. So that little bit of movement in her toe was actually starting to move more over the course of weeks. Over the course of a month, her other toes were starting to lift and move. I tell you, that wasn't much in the grand scheme of lower extremity.
It doesn't seem like much, right? But to her,
it was a big deal. And for her, it was a big deal because she was positive. If she was negative, she would have said, well, I'm not moving my legs
I can only move my toe.
Yeah. Or that's how it would be.
I can only move my toes instead of I can move my toes. It doesn't sound like much, but if you haven't been able to move your toes at all for 3 years,
and maybe
big deal.
Exactly. And this is a big tangent, and I want to put you on the spot with this question. Maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't. Why is negativity so much easier than positivity for a human mindset?
I think that is a good question from a neurological standpoint. I think that we are more we're more limbically driven classically, and that's like worst case scenario.
What does that mean?
That's like the fight or flight response. Like you just
Okay.
assume the worst
Mhm.
because you have to be able to adapt and respond.
A
Does that make
primitive
sense?
response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, I mean, that's just what I'm assuming. Like, I honestly don't know. That's just my assumption. That's my best educated guess.
Well, that's better guess than I had.
Hey, you're right. I don't know. I'll have to look into it, I
But
guess.
but yeah, we see so much more negativity in the world, or
Pessimism.
pessimism, than optimism. And why is that? It comes easier, I guess. So we have to work against it. I truly think that there's very few people that are positive by nature. I think it's a learned, practiced muscle, and it definitely was for me.
Oh, me too.
When I was in school, super negative and pessimistic about everything, and I never used to say I was negative. I'd always say I'm a
Realist.
realist. Yeah, I'm a realist. It's really, I'm just being real. Well, no, not necessarily. I'm expecting the negative outcome, and that's what I believe is real. And it's easy to do that. So I think it's a practice behavior.
I would agree with that. I think that all of us tend to probably be a little bit more negative
Mhm.
on occasion. One of my big inspirations for being positive was actually one of my really good friends. Guy is like a complete optimist. Almost to a fault where you're like, is there something wrong with this guy? Because he's so nice.
What kind of drugs are you using?
He's never like said anything bad. Like I've never heard him say anything negative about anyone when, something bad had happened. Oh, that's just part of the journey, man. We're going to figure it out. And I'm just like, Eric, if you're listening to this, that's an awesome quality. And I wish I had a little bit more of it, but I think that is a learned behavior. And after watching him and how he adapts to things, because I think that's true too. When you're negative and you see, the bad on things, you're not able to adapt as quickly. You're kind of like stuck in that rut where, oh, this bad happened to me and I'm going to wallow in my own self-pity, where if you see the good in things and you have a good attitude, you're like, okay, if something bad happens, but we're going to pivot, we're going to shift, we're going to adapt, and we're going to overcome. And I also think that like when you're overly pessimistic or you have a negative outlook, that really can have, when you look down on like a physiological level, it can impact your health really like negatively just by having a negative attitude.
That's right. That's very true. There's lots of things that happen with the physiological response to negativity and pessimism. We see like stress hormones, cortisol spiking, and other stress hormones, which ultimately drive increased blood sugar. You can, enough of a stress response, even if it's a stress response due to an emotional negativity, or that's no difference than a stress response to the stress glands. Then you have a bacterial infection in your body.
Yeah, your body doesn't differentiate between stress. Doesn't matter if you're getting chased by a grizzly bear or studying for an algebra test. Stress.
That's exactly right. So these stress responses, they create all sorts of horrible things, and cardiovascular disease, and it just goes on. New information on early stage dementia as a result of this massive oxidative stress. There's a reason why the joke is that, if people, it seems like they're aging fast or they're turning gray quickly, they must have dealt with a lot of stress. It's not that far off, really, maybe. So a lot of inflammatory chemicals, what we see is inflammatory cytokines. Also, when we have this pessimistic attitude, negative physiological outcomes can be just the response due to further self-destructive stress management strategies. So if we are in a state of depression, of victimization, well, if we're in that state, we feel defeated. We feel like there's nothing else we can lose. So we're looking for anything to soothe us, to like a pacifier. And that could be something, it's usually something self-destructive, because it gives us instant gratification, whether it's alcohol or drugs or some kind of reckless self-destructive behavior. How many people do we really see in society, if they're dealing with a massive emotional burden, they're going to go and relax and do all of these self-care strategies? Almost never.
Yeah.
Almost never. it's going to be, I'm going to eat a bunch of junk food. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff that's reckless.
Yep. Do something that's going to impact me negative down the road.
Yeah. So, and then I think another thing is when we feel like a victim, and again, in no way, shape, or form am I going to sit here and say it's an easy thing to not play the victim card, or it's an easy thing to be an optimist. No, it's maybe one of the hardest things that we're going to do on a daily basis. I truly think that is, because we're always going to be challenged. But what happens is, if it gets bad enough, is it changes our social behavior. And I think you were making these points. We withdraw from society, further creating a space of fear, frustration, and depression, because we can't be in a state of harmony if we're socially isolated. It's impossible.
Yeah. Really, when you look at it, like, your attitude can really dictate a lot of things in your life. And especially if you're suffering from something like a chronic illness, whether that's, like diabetes or cardiovascular disease or whatever. Like, there's certain things you can control and there's certain things you can't control. Well, if you control the things that you can, and you do it with a positive mindset, and you look at it as maybe not like a hurdle, but this is something I have to do. Well, this is something I'm going to do. This is going to get me where I want to go. Well, this is something I have to do because my doctor says I have to do this.
That's true. A have to versus an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do this because it's going to improve my life. Well, I have to do this or I'm going to lose my leg. My doctor says I have to do this or my circulation is going to be bad. I might lose my foot. You know what? My doctor said, if I do this, then my circulation is going to improve. I'm going to have better function in my legs. I can exercise more. You view it as a springboard into your next one.
Yeah.
The only thing you can control is your attitude and your effort.
That's so true. And if we see something as, if we're trying to do something, or we're trying to find motivation to do something, I think we talked about this before. I think we talked about it with Carrie Thrall, where there's two ways of creating that motivation. There's the one way, which is the avoidance model. I have to do this to avoid a heart attack, or I'm given the opportunity to do this to increase, cardiovascular health and be able to, continue running or whatever.
Riding my motorcycle, going for doing whatever, improving your quality of life, right?
So pursuing something not based off avoiding something or doing something that isn't the avoidance model, but the model of pursuit, the model of opportunity.
Yeah.
The have tos, or I have the opportunity to do this. I have a chance to do this versus I have to do this.
Right. And I think that gives you a certain amount of ownership over what's going on with you. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure it does.
It's like, I have to do this, or like, I am going to do this so I can do this. So it improves my quality of life so that I don't have to be on this medication. So I can play with my grandkids, so I can play with my kids. So like, whatever you want to do in your life, it gives you ownership of it, and it gives you some steps and strategies to start implementing.
And that's right. Like anybody that walks into your clinic or my clinic, their chronic illness, if we're beaten down long enough, we're going to have at least feel like at least a little bit of a victim. But these people must have ownership, because they're still walking in. If you're listening to this podcast and you've been struggling with some of this, or you're trying to look at the psychology of some of this, and see it from our point of view that see it every day, it's impossible. It's impossible to overcome chronic illness if we're a victim, because it's something we have to do. And if we're a victim, we're not going to do anything. If we're taking ownership, we're like, okay, this is the problem we got. Anything I can do, I'm going to do.
And if you are listening to this because you're looking for, the psychology and stuff like that behind it, we're not psychologists by any stretch of the imagination, but we actually do have a podcast that we came out with that is like the 5 most common personality traits of our most successful patients. Would definitely be a good place for you guys to look as well.
That's good. I'll put a link below for it. Yeah.
So, well, I hope that was good. I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't really take into account when they're dealing with a chronic illness. But honestly, the ball's in your court, and what you choose to do with it, the amount of effort and the intensity and the attitude you bring is all on you. So
Yeah,
bring a good one.
regardless of what hand you were dealt with, right? And we don't have to go too far to see somebody who's been dealt a tough hand in society, whether whatever health ailment or disability that they're dealing with. We got to remember, okay, this is what we've been dealt with. I'm going to take ownership of it. I'm going to do everything I can because that's what I can do. Back to attitude and effort. Right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys got value out of this or you enjoyed this podcast and videocast, please hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications. If you would like to contact us, you can actually do so at info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. That's the email associated with the podcast. You can find a lot of information on our websites. Mine is northlakeschiropractic.com. Dr. Glenn's is drgharrison.com. And stay tuned because we're going to continue to roll out new content each and every week. And you never know when we might cover something that's applicable to you. So
Sounds
until
good,
next
Dr.
week,
Kolby.
next time,
Yeah.
I guess.
I guess next time.
All right, buddy. Sounds
All right.
good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.